Today, I want to share with you one of my favorite stories from the Gospels. It occurs in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 24, verses 13 to 35. Let me read it to you. That same day, two of them were walking to the village Emmaus, about 7 miles out of Jerusalem. They were in deep conversation, going over all the things that had happened. In the middle of their talk and questions, Jesus came up and walked along with them. But they were not able to recognize who he was. He asked, "What is this you're discussing so intently as you're walking along?" They just stood there, long-faced, like they had lost their best friend. Then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what has happened in these last days?" Jesus said, "What has happened?" They said, "The things that had happened to Jesus the Nazarene. He was a man of God, a prophet, dynamic in word and works, blessed by both God and all the people. Then our high priest and leaders betrayed him, got him sentenced to death, and crucified him. And we had our hopes up that he was the one about to deliver Israel. And it is now the third day since it happened. But now some of our women have completely confused us. Early this morning they were at the tomb and couldn't find his body. They came back with a story that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of our friends went off to the tomb and to check and found it as empty as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus." Then he said to them, "So thick-headed, so slow-hearted, why can't you simply believe all that the prophets have said? Don't you see that these things had to happen, that the Messiah had to suffer and only then enter into his glory?" Then he started at the beginning with the book of Moses and went through all of the prophets, pointing out everything in the scriptures that had referred to him. They came to the edge of the village where they were headed. He acted as if he was going on, but they pressed him. "Stay and have supper with us. It's nearly evening. The day is done." So he went in with them. And here's what happened. He sat down at the table with them. Taking the bread, he blessed and broke it and gave it to them. At that moment, open-eyed, wide-eyed, they recognized him. And then he disappeared. Where do you go when the path appears to lead nowhere? Do you change direction? I know I have at times. For the disciples on the road to Emmaus, the dream of God had become a nightmare. They changed directions quickly. They thought to themselves, "Let's save what can be saved, even if it's only our own skin. Let's walk, let's get away quickly, let's get out of the city of Jerusalem." Just the day before, everything had seemed so promising. Thinking back, being called to follow Jesus, close to the Messiah, to have the privilege to be right where it's happening, to be at the inauguration of God's kingdom, to be disciples of the first hour. And now this, he on whom all of our hope was founded, dead, crucified, the most humiliating death. His body disappeared, stolen likely, a final insult at the hands of the empire. Seemingly out of nowhere, a stranger walks up to the disciples. And he starts walking with them again. There is an ease with which the stranger approaches them, but he doesn't come into their midst. He rather walks beside them, and in doing so, he forces them to see their path in a new angle. This is a change of direction, a leaving of the old path, a discovery of a new way. The stranger is asking them to retell their story, to rediscover their story, and in doing so, forces them to rediscover their way. The stranger is making resurrection. Like Cleopas, it is good not to walk alone. With someone by one's side, dealing with despair is much easier. There is so much to talk through, so much to discuss. Hope is gone. What will come and what will be? Having left the path of hope and light, where do we walk to? What road is ahead of us? Uncertainty, the unknown, and at times, despair clouds our perception. Through Jesus Christ, we know it had to be this way. It had to happen. When hope seems to have died, life is in fact remade, in mysterious ways, in ways which we don't often see or realize right away. Dreams are not in vain, because God dreams with us. God stays with us. Invite God in as the disciples invited the Lord in that day. As those in need of protection, they offer it. As those in need of help, they offer it. As those in need of nourishment, they offer it. And this takes trust. He who came uninvited, who gave comfort, is invited to stay. And now the roles reverse. In the breaking of the bread, the guest becomes the host, and their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And that is the centrality of the message. We open our hearts to those around us, and we invite them in. We open our hearts and homes to those in need, and we invite them in. We have to give trust to the people around us, and in doing so, we open our hearts to God, to the Lord, to Jesus Christ, and He gives back to us manifold the joy of being part of God's kingdom, part of this wonderful creation, this dream of God that makes this world such an infinitely more wonderful place to be and live and experience for all of us. So in giving, we receive, and in turn, our eyes are opened to the purpose and love of God in our lives. And that to me is tremendously good news. By giving, we receive God's love.